Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe. Chronicles of a Gooner. Harry Symeou time. Arsenal. Come on, you Gunners. Arsenal. Chronicles of a Gooner.
Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. This podcast is brought to you in partnership with okjersey.com. Looking for football shirts? Head over to okjersey.com and enter the discount code Harry for 8% off. How are we all feeling? How are we all feeling after what was a really frustrating night at Emirates Stadium? One that I think we've got to be really careful in the way that we analyze, because I think there is a tendency when a result goes against you to start to repaint the bigger picture and to look at the bigger picture through a different lens and potentially misconstrue the reality. So I think it's really important that we analyze this one with calmness, with some common sense. And I want to break the game down because I think there's a lot of talking points. A game that provided very little in terms of excitement. A game that provided very little in terms of, action, is a game that I think there's a lot to unpack from. And that's what makes football the fascinating sport that it is. Look, a massive hello to everybody who is with us, whether you're with us on YouTube, whether you're with us live or you're watching this back or you're listening to us on Apple or Spotify. Thank you so much for being here. Really do appreciate it. And I do want to just highlight that if you are thinking about becoming a Chronicles of a Gooner Patreon, and you might want to wait till the end of the show and decide whether you like it or not, you can do so, and you can take advantage of our January sale. 25% off your first month's membership if you enter the discount code that is detailed in the description below. And if you want a taste of what we did or what we do as patrons, what we do for our patrons. I'm all over the place this morning. That's how you know last night took its toll on me. Then go over, sign up as a free member, and free members just for a limited time can access what we did last night from Emirates Stadium after the game. So go and check that out, and that will give you a feel for what is happening over there. Okay, how are we feeling? Describe how you are feeling in one word after last night's game. I think that's a good place to start. I want to take you guys' temperature a little bit before I move on to share my thoughts, because I've got a lot of thoughts. Cards says, big up Gooners, happy Friday. Let's not dwell on this result. Let's pick up and move on. The performance wasn't great, but we need to remember it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. Let's stick together. Come on, you Gunners. Rumble says 6 points clear. We move. AFC 777 says, never saw the board draw coming. That second half performance by us was woeful. James B says, even the best have blips. It's a long season. We are top quality. We'll learn and we will move forward. Melissa says, morning Gooners. I was furious last night, but found some clarity this morning. Poor performance, but we didn't concede. Still top of the league. And I'm guessing the boys will be keen to move on. That just gives us a feel for how people are feeling. I asked for some one-worders. We've got some of those. We've got calm. We've got disappointed. We've got irritated, exhausted, down, dispirited, frustrated, disappointed. There's a lot. Okay, let's start to break the game down then. Let's talk about how I saw it, my experience of it last night. So what I want to do, right, is I want to provide some explanations for why I think our performance was the way it was. These are not, and I might have to put a message rolling across the bottom of the screen, these are not excuses. Arsenal's second half performance was nowhere near good enough. And actually, watching the first half back again this morning, I don't even think the first half was as good as some people maybe felt it was at the time. I think you were watching that first half thinking Arsenal are normally pretty good after the break. Arsenal have of late been a second half team. And so if, we're sort of threatening a little bit in the first half and we're controlling the game and we're controlling the flow and the pattern of it, that's us laying the foundations and the groundwork for what's to come in what is going to be a much better, a more imposing second half. And that imposing, much better performance, it just didn't come. So I completely understand and get the frustration that people are feeling this morning. If we start with the team selection, it was exactly the team that I would have picked. So I've got no issues with that. And I'm not going to be a hindsight merchant when it comes to the team selection. I will be a hindsight merchant about some other things. In fact, I'll be a hindsight merchant about the team selection at Bournemouth, because I do think that that's played a part here. Now, I think when you look at our midfield of Rice, Zubimendi, and Odegaard, it's a really good, well-balanced, high-energy midfield. If they're not all quite at it, then you can see it. And I did wonder at Bournemouth, when we made the changes that we did, we obviously changed the 2 wide players, but we stayed with the same back line. We stayed with the same midfield. Was there room at Bournemouth? Could we have got away with it at Bournemouth just to make at least one change in midfield and make sure that everybody was just that, or at least one of those midfield 3 were a bit fresher and a bit sharper? And would that have compensated for the lack of energy that we saw from some of the others? Would that have seen us dominate? I think in terms of why we struggle to really get a hold of the game in the middle of the park, which is obviously a really important area, I think you have to look at not just energy levels, but I think you have to look at the tactics of it all. And I think Liverpool playing with Florian Wirtz in that sort of ghost 9 position, but with him dropping deep into midfield, that meant they could dominate that area of the park. Szoboszlai, McAllister, Gravenberch, all really, really good players in their own right. And then you drop Wirtz into there as well. They outnumbered us. And we had problems not necessarily controlling the ball during the first half, but controlling those midfield spaces. And it's why Arsenal ended up having to try and attack Liverpool in a very, very different way. Now, what do I mean by that? One of the most common routes of attack that Arsenal traveled down yesterday was this thing where we sort of asked Saka and Trossard to pull really wide, like onto the touchline. And we create a bit of a space and a gap between the wingers and the centre forward. Those are called half spaces. And what we were doing yesterday was pushing our fullbacks into those half spaces. So our fullbacks are inverting to a degree, and they're joining in with that attacking line. And I actually asked Mikel Arteta after the game why it was that we saw that so often last night. Like, what was the thinking behind it? We've seen it before. We've seen Timber join in with attacks. We've seen Timber get forward. But there was an instance right at the start of the second half that really kind of confirmed to me that this was Arsenal's plan. This was Arsenal's approach. It was early in the second half, and it was a situation where I think Arsenal had the ball at the back, and Leandro Trossard had just started to drift inside off that left flank and go in towards the middle of the park. And Mikel Arteta on the sidelines was screaming at him, get back out wide, get back out wide. And then he's pointing at Nkapie, and he's pointing, he's saying, you in there. Okay, so that was a deliberate ploy from Arsenal. And in the first half, we kind of threatened to make it work. Timber got into some decent positions. A few cutbacks, a few crosses that probably weren't at the level that we needed them to be. But there were signs that was maybe not definitely going to work, but a route that we could potentially exploit if we could only get it right in terms of that pass. Saliba played the ball in a few times there, and the passes were over here, overcooked. The quality was lacking, right? But the idea seemed like an idea that could potentially bear fruit. So you work your way through that first half, and you think, we're sort of slowly getting better and better. We had one hairy moment defensively when Saliba and Raya had a bit of miscommunication. Saliba goes to sort of play it to Raya so that he can clear facing his own goal. Raya's already committed to coming out and sweeping up and cleaning up, and that means that Raya has to adjust to stop the ball going past him. The ball ends up going to Connor Bradley, who has an effort from distance that comes off the top of the crossbar. That's as close, really, as anybody came to scoring in that entire game. So, we had that one hairy moment defensively, but overall, I thought we looked solid. And as I've said right at the start of the show, I was okay with the first half performance at the time, because I was very much of the belief that Arsenal, the second half team, they're going to come out and they're going to impose themselves at the start of the second period, like we did against Villa, like we've done against others, like we did against Tottenham, etc., etc., etc. But a few other points on the way the game started and why it felt like a bit of a non-event. First of all, there was a tense atmosphere. I've heard some people today describe it as an expectant atmosphere, in that Arsenal fans turned up last night thinking, we're absolutely going to batter Liverpool. We don't need to do our bit. We don't need to be vocal. We don't need to be behind the team because they've got this, right? I didn't really feel that. I didn't feel the level of expectation being beyond what it should have been. I felt a couple of things. I felt that there was a tense atmosphere because of how badly we all want it and how badly we all felt that if we could win yesterday, that would be a massive step towards winning the Premier League title. But I also thought, okay, and you're going to call me mad, and I know I'm going full tie on this. I thought that the weather, the weather's not an excuse, okay? So please don't take it that way. But I thought the weather right at the start of the game, when it was really bad, contributed to both sides struggling to get going. The conditions are for both, okay? You can't sit there and say the weather cost this team or that team. But anyone that was at Emirates Stadium last night will know that the rain was beyond what we've experienced in recent times. And the wind, the way it was whipping around Emirates Stadium, a stadium that normally does a pretty good job of keeping the wind out. You really felt it yesterday. So it's not an excuse for Arsenal's performance or for Arsenal's struggles. It's an excuse for why the game, I think, started the way it did. And that set a pattern, that set a rhythm, that set a tempo that neither side was able really and truly to break out of. As I say, going in at halftime, the expectancy was we come out after the break and we're much, much better. And we're much, much better and we'll be fine. We'll wear them down. There were signs towards the end of that first half that we were starting to get into the right positions, into the right spaces. And even though we hadn't scored and we hadn't created too much in terms of clear-cut chances, you felt like we were doing the right things in theory. And so it was going to come. I can't express how disappointed I was when I came out after halftime and went through the first 10 minutes of the second half feeling that Arsenal didn't have the power to really take the game to Liverpool and to build on some of the positive things that we did in the first half. That was my big disappointment and frustration. The fact that we maybe ran out of gas towards the end of the game and that we had to turn to our bench to refresh it, that's fine. That's to be expected. We're coming into this off the back of a really hectic and busy period. And we talk all the time, don't we, about players playing every 2.5, 3 days and why that's not good for the game and why that's impacting the standard of matches, etc., etc. But we needed to have the power in the start of the second half to really impose ourselves. And we didn't. We couldn't press. We couldn't get on the ball. When we had the ball, we didn't use it right. There was no accuracy in anything that we did. We were too loose in possession. It felt like the longer that went on, the more desperate we were to get the ball forward early, and we were making even worse decisions. If we hit it long, Victor Gyökeres was nowhere near it. If we hit it high up to Bukayo Saka, the ball's 20 feet up in the air. What's he supposed to do with it in terms of bringing it down when he's got pressure around him? The same on the other side. I thought we were quite lucky early on in that second half not to concede a penalty, if I'm being completely honest. If we're being honest about it, hand on heart, we got to talk about that. It's a completely silly challenge from Leandro Trossard, who for me wasn't his normal composed and calm self yesterday. He seemed to get involved in a few bits and pieces over on that far side as I was watching it in the first half. And then the second half, he's obviously working back defensively, which is good and it's what we want to see. But the challenge he made on Florian Wirtz was just downright stupid. And on another day, that gets given as a penalty. And you know what? If it does, we can't really complain too much. It's clumsy, it's late, and it's really, really poor from him. I wasn't surprised that he was one of the players that made way. I think about 5-6 minutes before that change was made, I hopped onto X and I said something along the lines of Trossard and Gyökeres need to come off. Get Martinelli and Jesus on. And that's what we did. Now, at the time, I got to be honest, completely transparent with my feelings and my thoughts. I was torn on whether Martinelli was the right answer. I knew that Gyökeres had to come off. I knew that Gyökeres had to depart. He wasn't doing it, and we'll come on to his performance in a bit. On the left-hand side, there was a part of me that thought Madueke would be the right answer, and that Madueke is the one, given his recent form, that I'd quite like to see running at the fullback over and over again with a view to getting to the byline and making something happen. But then I started to think about the combination that I often talk about between Jesus and Martinelli, how that works. And I think that sort of relationship that those two was probably the tipping point in terms of Mikel making the decision that he did. But those guys come on, and again, got a bit more of an outlet, but still the ball's not sticking up front with Gabby Jesus. Martinelli's not really having those 1v1 situations often enough that we want him to. And listen, for what it's worth, I don't think Martinelli played badly when he came on. He is not the brunt of my frustrations today. Let's put it that way. But, we made those changes. Does it really work? And then as the game goes on, you can see all the things I mentioned in the first half. Liverpool with that extra body in the middle of the park, dominating, controlling the spaces. Only this time they were controlling the ball as well. And where I do want to be a little bit critical of the manager is not in terms of his intentions. I've seen a lot of people saying Arsenal didn't want to win the game as it went on. Arsenal decided on about 70 minutes that they were happy to take the 0-0, to get the draw, and to sort of stay 6 points clear, and that be that. I completely disagree with that, because I think Mikel Arteta's substitutions told us a very, very different story. He takes Saka off, he brings on Madueke, and this is the one that was really telling for me. He takes Martin Odegaard off, and he brings on Eberechi Eze. Now, under normal circumstances, when you need a goal, I would say bringing Eze on for Odegaard is absolutely fine. Odegaard is a creator. Odegaard's been really, really good in recent weeks, but he's played a lot of football. He's still relatively recently back from a long-term issue. I think for me, Odegaard had to probably come off, but I would have brought on Mikel Merino. I would have brought on Mikel Merino and not Eberechi Eze. And I'll explain a little bit about why. In order to platform Eberechi Eze, you need to have control. You need to have the ball. We didn't have the ball, and we didn't have any control. The only way you get control and wrestle it back from a team that have managed to sort of take a grip of the situation is by working really hard and doing all the off-the-ball stuff first and foremost. And I know Odegaard was gassed out, right? But it's just about the profile of player. It's not this player's better than that player, or this player's rubbish and this player's great, and all the rest of it. It's nothing to do with that. It's about the game state. It's about their physical condition. It's about all of those factors rolled into one. And I just felt that Eze coming on was a bit of a redundant decision, in that you bring him on, but if we ain't got control of the ball and he can't go and sit on the edge of the opposition's penalty box because we don't have them pinned back, we're not squeezing the game high up, then he's ineffective. And so, again, in theory, the change makes sense. And when I saw him come on, I thought, go on, Mikel, like, you're going for this. I love it. But then as I watched it sort of unfold and play out the way it did, very quickly into his arrival on the pitch, 5 minutes probably, I'm looking at it and I'm going, yeah, but we don't have the control to get the best out of Eze here. So is this actually going to work? And he was an ineffective change. Again, not to sort of have a pop at the player, because I don't think he was, put into the environment where he could succeed. And I think there was a lot bigger problems than that. But it's just an example of where I think, although the approach generally and the mindset of let's go and win the game was right, I don't think we did the basics enough or well enough to then be able to take that next step that Eze would have maybe given us under different circumstances. So it might not have been the first midfield change that I made personally. Another reason as to why the last 20 minutes or so, it felt like Arsenal maybe weren't pushing and fighting and, essentially as desperate to win it as they might have been, was I think because we had a problem in our defense, quite a big problem, and a problem that meant that we had to drop off 10 yards. We had to babysit. We had to look after one of our defenders, and that was Miles Lewis-Skelly. I really like Miles, and he's come a long way, and he's very, very talented. He's going through a bit of a difficult patch right now, and there's no denying that. Every time he comes on at left back, we look weaker for it. Frimpong is quick. Frimpong is sharp. He's a handful. But he just had the beating of Miles Lewis-Skelly from the minute that Lewis-Skelly came onto the pitch, and it was far too easy. And where I'm talking about us not being controlling enough and dominant in the middle of the park to platform our attacking players to then potentially go on and win the game, I do think that was in part because our distances got too big again. And when I talk about distances, I talk about the distances between the lines. For me, the defense, Saliba, Gabriel, and Timber, they had to drop off an extra few yards from fear of Frimpong roasting Miles Lewis-Skelly. And so while I am very sort of wary of making this about individuals, because in the bigger picture, the performance, particularly in that second half, was nowhere near where it needs to be, I think Miles Lewis-Skelly's introduction, and I know we didn't have a choice because Nketiah went off with what looks like it might be a hamstring problem, but that was also part of the reason why we couldn't, in my opinion, go on, take that next step and go and win the game. Ultimately, right, we'll talk about the bigger picture in a bit, because I think the bigger picture is really, really important. I think it's really important that you don't allow your frustration at the fact that we didn't win the game to contaminate your view of the bigger picture. It's really, really important that you don't do that. But I thought MLS was an issue for us. Victor Gyökeres. I mean, I think I sat here on the pod and said this is going to be his night or something like that. Going into the game, when I got to Emirates Stadium, everyone I was speaking to, I was saying this is going to be his night. You know, he's going to do it tonight. This is the night that he's going to really and truly announce himself as an Arsenal player. And that wasn't the case. In fact, far from it. Now, I'm, again, very wary of pinning things on him that he's not necessarily responsible for, i.e. The all-round performance. But did I get enough from him again? Absolutely not. And we'll cover that in depth, in detail after the break. We're also going to talk about the Martinelli incident as well. And we'll round off by talking about the bigger picture before taking some of your thoughts and comments from the live chat box too. So there's loads still to come on this episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner. Don't go anywhere.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe.
That's right. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe. Thank you so much for being here. Really, really do appreciate all the love and all the support. Remember, quick reminder, if you haven't done so already, like, subscribe, hype, all of that stuff. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please do leave us a review as well. They really, really do help. And also, if you want to check us out on Patreon, there is a discount available to those of you that sign up in January, of course. And if you sign up as a free member, you'll be able to have a listen for a very short period of time what we did last night. That'll give you a feel for what we do on Patreon, and you can decide whether it's something that you want to be a part of. There is another Patreon episode coming later on in the day as well, so stay tuned for that. Right, let's just go into the comments actually before we move on. I do want to take some of your thoughts. Tylon says, your take on Eze not being able to play if we don't have control is wild. I watched him win plenty of games for Palace where they didn't have much of the ball. Cup final versus City, for example. I didn't say that generally speaking, Eze can't play unless Arsenal are totally dominant. I'm talking about in the context of last night's game. Because in the context of last night's game, Liverpool, for large periods, had 6 players in the midfield versus our 3. Okay? And if that is the situation, then Eze cannot go and take up the positions that he wants to. He has to do other work. He has to do different things that I don't necessarily think bring the best out of him. So the context of the game made it that way. It's not to say that Eze can't play. But also, the other thing I would argue is Eze maybe would drift a little bit, hang around a little bit, if you want to put it that way, in Oliver Glasner's team. But Oliver Glasner's team play with a back five when out of possession. It's a completely different setup. It's a completely different shape. And they play with not just a back five, but with two deep-lying defensive midfield players sitting in front of that back five as well. The system is very, very different. That system was geared to allow someone like Eberechi Eze positional freedom. Arsenal's model is not the same, and therefore it's not as simple as saying he did it at Crystal Palace, so it should be exactly the same at Arsenal. That's kind of my point. There's lots of really interesting questions coming through. I will pick those up as we go on, so just hold fire on them. Victor Gyökeres, let's get back to that. I'm just not seeing it, guys. I'm not seeing it. The movement's not sophisticated enough. When the ball does flash across the 6-yard box, he's not there. In which case, I'm questioning, what the benefit of having you in the team is. Our all-round game is, people say that it's positively impacted by Victor Gyökeres in that they look at the record with versus without him. I think that's a bit of a red herring. I really do. I want him to make more proactive and smarter runs. I want him to come and get on the ball, even when, he's struggling to get it in the areas that he wants, because I think it's important to have touches in a game of football. It's really, really important to have touches in a game of football. And I'll explain why. We've all played football to some level, right? Or to some degree. If you get a golden opportunity come to you in the first minute of a match that you're involved in, most of the time, most people aren't going to take that opportunity because it's their first literal touch of the ball. And you want to find and feel your way into a game of football. Even if you drop 10 yards from centre forward, come, face the midfielder, receive it into feet, and just lay it off back to him, and then spin and go back again. That is you being involved in the game. That's you building up your touches. That's you building up your confidence. That's you getting a feel for the ball, a feel for the game, a feel for the environment. What Victor Gyökeres does is try and stay high and try and make an impact in that area of the pitch. But when the ball does come to him, it very rarely is the case that his touch, his pass, his layoff, his turn, whatever it might be, is at the level required. Now, there were a couple of interesting touches from Victor Gyökeres yesterday, if we're being fair in our analysis, that maybe were better than what we've seen, generally speaking. But I do think we have to look at the bigger picture with Victor Gyökeres, just like we have to do with this game. And the reality is that he's not giving us enough. He does not warrant starting at centre forward every week for me. The goals are few and far between, but not only are the goals not coming, his all-round game ain't there. Now, if Jesus played at centre forward every single week, or Havertz played at centre forward every week, I would probably argue the case that goals-wise, output-wise, there wouldn't actually be that much difference, but they'd give us other things. And those other things can help compensate for the fact that the goals are not coming. We thought we were signing a top draw number 9 in Victor Gyökeres. And I think so far, we've not seen that. And so if people want to question whether he is at that level, I think that is absolutely fair at this stage. It's absolutely fair. And you know that there's a problem when you come home from the game and you jump on to social media and you're scrolling through and you're having a read of people's opinions and views and all the rest of it. And what you're seeing on your timeline is people taking screenshots of spaces that Victor Gyökeres could have potentially run into had someone played the pass. It's all hypotheticals. The fact that you're having to look that hard to find the good things that Gyökeres is doing, that says it all. And maybe you should be looking a little bit closer to home. In order for people to play him in those scenarios, they have to believe that he's going to make something of the situation. They have to trust in him. They have to believe in him. I'm not sure that that trust and that belief is there, despite the lip service that we get from some of the players. They're his teammates. What do you expect them to say? Okay. But I always think that if you have to look too hard for something, there's probably an issue there. And again, a bit like when I've been talking about Nwaneri and Eze lately and other players, Why are we afraid of having those conversations? We are striving for excellence at Arsenal Football Club. We want to be the best. We want to be the Premier League champions. We want to be the European champions. So we are striving for excellence. But when you are on that journey and striving for that high level of performance, you cannot afford to let glaring issues go by the wayside. You cannot afford to keep papering over cracks. At some point, you have to confront this. At some point, you have to have a conversation and a discussion with regards to whether or not Victor Gyökeres is good enough to lead the line for Arsenal week in, week out. I've said it before. I'll say it again. He's not the option. He's a option. And I'm fine with him being a option. But I don't think right now he deserves to start every single game. I don't think right now he deserves to be our go-to guy. And I've got no qualms in saying that because that's a football opinion. And why are we afraid to have football opinions? I do agree that at times these things turn into something more. And it can become personal with some people. And it can become a bit of a vendetta. And it can go on and on and on and on and on. And in those cases, the flip reverse of what I've described when we're looking for the good things about Gyökeres happens, whereby we go from now over scrutinizing everything because we want to make the point that he's not doing well enough. You know, there's two sides to it, obviously. The truth is somewhere in between. The truth is always somewhere in between. I find the extremes that we are served up nowadays, but I'm not impressed with him. And, you know, I tried to be really positive going into this game about what he could do. I think it's time he's dropped from the starting 11. That's my view. And I'm not afraid to say that. Right, should we get on to that Gabriel Martinelli thing? Because that has made quite a splash, hasn't it? Last night and, of course, this morning. So let's do that now, shall we? Gabriel Martinelli. Was he out of order? What do we make of all the reaction? We'll get into that next. Okay, so I think in order to summarize my thoughts on this as eloquently as I possibly can, I think I've got to pull out the X post that I put out last night because I think that was me putting my point across in the way that I'd like to. So let's take it back a minute. Let's talk about what actually happened, right? So ball goes over the top. Conor Bradley puts it out of play. And as he puts it out of play, he seems to do his knee, jar it, twist it. I don't know. But he goes down and he's in some pain. And Gabriel Martinelli, who just wants to get on with the game, wants to go and score, wants to keep those energy levels high, feels that in that moment, Conor Bradley is making the most of a situation in an attempt to delay the restart, to slow things down, to take some wind out of Arsenal's sails and to impact Arsenal's momentum. He goes and he sort of pushes Conor Bradley off of the pitch so that he can receive treatment without the game being delayed, but not before Conor Bradley makes a move to kind of roll further onto the pitch so that he can be absolutely sure that the game is going to be stopped. Now, Conor Bradley might have a serious injury. And honestly, we wish him all the best. We do, because I don't want to see players injured for long periods of time, especially not young players at the start of their career. He's had a lot of injury problems this season. He is a promising talent. And put club allegiances aside for a minute, I don't wish that on anybody, okay? So I hope it's not as severe as it looked. I hope it's not as serious as it looked. But everybody of sensible mind understands and knows that Gabriel Martinelli hasn't realized in that moment the potential severity of that issue and just wants to get on with the game and reacts to Bradley moving. He goes to push him. The ball thing, I've seen people describe it as, I saw a really good one online earlier. Someone said he hurled the ball at Conor Bradley's head. I mean, really, it's about 2 yards away and he just drops it onto him. Hardly the end of the world. What I take issue with is the way that Gabriel Martinelli's been portrayed after this. Okay? I don't like this witch hunt that was sparked largely by Gary Neville and his commentary, which was, for me, really poor. I think that, and I work as a commentator, not at Gary Neville's level, obviously, right? But one of the things I always think about is that when I'm commentating on a game, particularly for a neutral audience. Now, Some of the games I do, they are for a neutral audience. Some of the games I do, I'm doing them for an Arsenal audience. And when I'm doing for an Arsenal audience, I'm aware of that. And my views and how far I go in terms of expressing my views in the commentary, it's different to when I'm doing it for a neutral audience. Gary Neville's doing it for a neutral audience, and he has got to be a little bit more balanced in the way he was. I'm fuming with Martinelli. If I was, what did he say? I'm surprised no Liverpool player has come over to whack him. Hold on a minute. You're advocating that someone gets whacked because of a bit of gamesmanship. It just, for me, it's 1 minute you're Mr. I'm the player and I've been there and I've experienced it and we all let emotions get the better of us. And, things happen. You do what you got to do. 1 minute, that's Gary Neville, the Gary Neville that smashed Jose Antonio Reyes to pieces in that famous game up at Old Trafford. 1 minute, you're that Gary Neville. And the next minute, you're super precious Gary Neville, who's upset that Martinelli's tried to roll him a yard off the pitch. Well, which one is it? You're either super precious and you don't like what Gabriel Martinelli did, but you don't advocate players coming in and whacking him, as he put it afterwards, or you're consistent. If you're consistent and you go, yeah, Martinelli, it's a bit edgy, it's part and parcel of the game, but so therefore it doesn't warrant that mad reaction that I'm suggesting the Liverpool players take, then I can live with that. But it's the hypocrisy of it all. It's the hypocrisy of it all. It's the, people say in the chat, and I've seen this a lot, is a hatred for Arsenal. There's a hatred for Liverpool on Gary Neville's part as well, as an ex-Man United player, understandably. I guess my point is that a commentator shouldn't be saying that Liverpool players should go and whack someone because of something that we see quite often, players trying to move each other off the pitch, players not acknowledging, understanding the severity of a certain situation. Listen to this, right? And this is how I framed it, okay? And my view on this, right? My view on this incident is largely influenced by what I heard from Arne Slot when he came in to give us the radio interviews. I was waiting in the sort of tunnel flash interview area for the managers to come through, and I was scrolling through my phone at the time, and it was Martinelli this, Martinelli that, retrospective action is needed, etc., etc. All this really, in my opinion, over the top stuff for what was not that big of a deal. So when Arne Slot came in, after Mikel Arteta, by the way, I expected Arne Slot to come in and say, yeah, out of order, etc., etc. And he didn't. Arne Slot, to a degree, said that he understood what Gabriel Martinelli was thinking. And so for me, Slot's Martinelli comments were mature, they were reasonable, and they were designed to diffuse a situation that some media outlets were desperate to overblow out of desperation for a talking point. And he also used that incident and that example as an opportunity to highlight one of the actual problems in our game: time wasting, rolling around on the floor, feigning injury to get the game stopped. There is no doubt in my mind, and I've interviewed Gabriel Martinelli a few times, there is no doubt in my mind that if in that moment Martinelli understands the potential extent of that injury, he does not do that. He doesn't do it. Right? He simply doesn't do it. I'm sure he apologized to Conor Bradley after the game. He said that he was messaging him, and he put out that bit on Instagram to just confirm that conversation had happened. Conor Bradley will be worried about his knee right now and worried about how long he's potentially going to be sidelined for. And I'm sure Conor Bradley ain't got the arse with Gabriel Martinelli. I talk about Gary Neville's commentary and how I disagreed with it. I thought Peter Drury was brilliant, though. I thought he nailed it when he said that Martinelli failed to read the room. That's what Martinelli did. That's what Martinelli is guilty of, failing to read the room. Not of being malicious, not of being nasty, not of deliberately trying to hurt someone. Gabriel Martinelli is only guilty of not reading the room properly. But Gary Neville reckons that the Liverpool players should then go on to whack him. I just don't understand when one of the best pundits that we had in Gary Neville, and he really was when he first started doing the job, has turned into just another clickbaiter constantly after a soundbite that sticks. And I'll summarize to you as well, right? How this whole issue is indicative of the state that football media is in today. First of all, it was a non-event of a game in a lot of ways, and therefore you're looking for a talking point, you're looking for a flashpoint. As an editor, as a content guy, you're looking for something that you can really kind of go in on and make a talking point of and have conversation and discussion around. When I got home last night, I got into bed, and I always do this after an Arsenal game. I get home, I have a little scroll of social media, and I try and gauge what the feeling is in general before I go to sleep. And I'd seen loads of X posts about what it was that Gary Neville said, but there wasn't like a definitive quote. It was like Gary Neville's out of order or Gary Neville's spot on. Like there was different views and different opinions flying around. And I thought, I haven't seen the game on Sky. I've been at the game. I need to establish exactly what Gary Neville said here. So I type in on Google, okay, and I'll show this to you now, okay. Gary Neville on Martinelli. I typed in on Google Gary Neville on Martinelli because I wanted to see exactly word for word what Gary Neville said. And what do I find? What do I find? Let me share the screen with you now to sort of exemplify exactly what I'm talking about. I find a whole Sky page, a whole news page, right? Built around this. Gabriel Martinelli, Arsenal forwards push on Conor Bradley, criticised by Gary Neville, Roy Keane and Daniel Sturridge. And then if you scroll down, there's a thumbnail and there's a video. And if I click on that video for a second, got to be careful of copyright here, but I just want to gauge how long the video is. Oh, there's an advert there. Forget it. The adverts are going to ruin it. But if you click on that video, there's about a 30-second to a minute video of Gary Neville moaning about what Gabriel Martinelli's done there. And it's so indicative of the way that media's gone. Okay, the game was rubbish. Both teams struggled to create anything of note. Both teams cancelled each other out. So we got to find something to make a mountain out of. Let's go with this. It will spark emotion. It will spark debate. It will create a back and forth. It will create engagement. So let's do it. Sky Sports are making standalone pages on that. Videos of that. Tells you everything you need to know. Tells you everything you need to know about where we're at. Now, for the record and to be clear, and I've said that Gary Neville, that Gabriel Martinelli was guilty of not reading the room, and I agree with that. I don't actually have a problem with people saying Gabriel Martinelli was out of order in that moment. If that's how you feel, that's how you feel. I'm not here to censor people's opinions, I beg your pardon, or tell them how to feel. If that's your view, that's fine. Where I have an issue is where it goes too far, where it turns from criticism of a player based on a particular action in said circumstance. Where it turns from that to witch hunt is where I've got a problem. Because listen, if Granit Xhaka did that, okay, there will be people that go, oh, he's got a nasty side. And, you know, that's completely expected. If Roy Keane back in the day did it, or Gary Neville himself did it, people would go, oh, nasty fella he is, isn't it? There's no history with Gabriel Martinelli whatsoever. And I'm not saying history is everything and that you should judge people based on previous actions always. But my point is the willingness of an ex-professional footballer at the highest level, who was one of the biggest S-houses I've ever come across, who's openly admitted that he and his teammates wanted to smash into players to stop them outplaying them, to become so precious about something as innocuous as that just shows you that it's only about the clicks and it's only about the interaction. And that was my big frustration with the comment. I thought Arne Slot, and listen, Arne Slot has irritated me at times in recent months with the things that he said about Liverpool and the excuses he seemingly made. But Arne Slot, I tip my hat to you. Credit where credit's due. You were absolutely bang on about this. And you resisted the temptation to be drawn into sensationalism by a media that were just desperate to find a talking point. So that's it. That's it for me. Okay, I do want to talk bigger picture before we dive into the comment section. It's really, really important that we do that just very, very quickly. An interesting stat that I pulled out that I found a little bit earlier on in the day. This was the first time since March 2010 that someone stopped Liverpool from having a shot on target in the Premier League. That's the end of a 600-game run for the Reds. Now, why have I hit you with that stat at the start of my kind of bigger picture section? Well, because I think this is important in that what this tells me is that Arsenal at their worst, and believe me, they were at their worst yesterday. Their performance in that second half especially was really, really poor. Arsenal at their worst are solid. And if you're solid, you've always got a chance. And I've talked about the reasons why I think that we didn't have what we needed to go on and sort of win it in the end. The substitutions didn't have the desired effect. I thought we were affected by the fact that we had to make a change at left back, which meant we were less comfortable defensively there. I thought that had a knock-on effect on the positioning of others and how high our line was, etc., etc. But even at our worst, we don't lose. And I think it's really, really important. Like, Man City have dropped points in 3 consecutive games. Unprecedented, unheard of. Okay? But you've also got to zoom out and look at the bigger picture and say, we've just picked up, some points or a point that means that we stay, 6 points clear at the end of a really difficult and taxing run. And Portsmouth is to come at the weekend, and we can make some changes there. Great. We can sort of use that as a bit of a refresh, as a bit of an opportunity to go again. We are top of the Premier League form guide. We have won 5 of the last 6. We have taken 16 points from a possible 18. We've conceded 5 goals across those games. We've got +7 goal difference across those games, and we've averaged 2 goals a game. Guess what? It ain't that bad. It ain't that bad. And would it have been great and a massive step towards going and winning that Premier League title if only we could have, on this instance, found that little extra something, beaten Liverpool, taken maximum points, and really punished Manchester City, put our foot on their throat, essentially, for their slip up? Yeah, of course it would. Of course it would. That wasn't to be, but football isn't that clear cut. Football isn't that straightforward. Football isn't that black and white. And I think for me, it's really, really important. And I did touch on this earlier, but I'll make the point again before we go into your comments and thoughts. So start getting them in, and your questions as well. I think it's really important to not let the frustration of last night contaminate the way that you view the bigger picture right now. People say things in the chat like, if you win this title, will you feel empty? No. Why would I feel empty? I've been waiting 20 plus years for this. Why would I feel empty? And that, in a nutshell, that is a microcosm of the way that people are over-analyzing what we watched last night. Nobody was saying that we're boring, that we ain't got an edge when we went and put 3 goals in the back of the net of Bournemouth at the weekend. No one was saying it when we swatted away Aston Villa like they weren't even there. Nobody was saying it when we went and got a good, hard-fought win at the Hill Dickinson a few weeks ago. The bigger picture is that over the Christmas period, we've been really good. Really, really good. Better than I could have hoped, given the fixtures that we had. Okay, because during that period, we played Aston Villa high-flying. We had a tricky game away to Bournemouth. Liverpool, the team that have beaten us most in the Premier League history, we had them. We went away to Everton, and we navigated a tricky game against Brighton, who can make life difficult, as they did to Manchester City the other night. If you told me at the start of the Christmas period we were going to come out the other end 6 points clear, I'd have been delighted. I'd have been buzzing with that. I just think that you can't allow that frustration to alter the way you view the bigger picture. Now, the frustration, it should be there, Because as I said earlier, we're striving for excellence. And in order to achieve excellence, you need to be honest. You need to have a long, hard look in the mirror at times, and you need to call things out. And I'm sure internally there will be a debrief. There will be discussions. There will be conversations about why the game went the way it did. But you've also got to give Liverpool credit for nullifying us. But, you know, to put into context what I've been saying about how even at our worst, we're solid, that was Liverpool at their best. Not in terms of the personnel available to them. They were missing a lot of players. But what I mean is in terms of how each one of those players performed. They performed to a really high level. But even with all of that, and I know they were depleted and I know they had players missing, but all they were able to do was nullify. Arne Slot literally himself said, I don't know why everybody's overblowing this performance. We didn't play very well. Didn't create anything. So that's the game. That's the game that we just watched. A game where teams cancelled each other out. Right, really, really brief pause. And when I come back, we're going to finish off with your questions, with your thoughts from the live chat. If you've put them in already, if you put a question in already, copy and paste it, stick it back in there again with a cue at the start, just to make it that little bit easier for me, so that I can then pick them out from the crowd of comments, and we'll work our way through some of those.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe.
That's right. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe. Can I just ask you, can we have a bit of a drive on the likes? The likes are way down below where they need to be, considering how many of you are watching. I don't know what it is. Am I talking nonsense? Is the show that bad? Or have you just not done it yet because you've not got around to it or forgotten to do it? If that's the case, I wouldn't ask for a like if you think I'm talking crap. But if you are enjoying the show, if you're here regularly, you know what we're all about. Smash that like button. Help us get up to at least 100 likes by the time we wrap up the live stream element of this. Okay, let's go into the chat box and see what you guys are saying then, shall we? Callum Morrison says, morning H. Did that feel like maturity because we stayed solid in the second half? 0 shots on target for Liverpool, or disappointment because at the Emirates you expect us to impose ourselves and win? I think, Callum, that both things can be true at once. And that is very much how I feel today, that both of those elements are true. On the one hand, we didn't give anything cheap away. We made sure that we didn't get caught out. We made sure that we did the basics in order to protect the point that we had at that time, rather than risking it in search of all three. Sometimes you get a feel, sometimes you just know that it ain't going to be your day. I sort of knew it from about 70 minutes. I suspect the players knew it. And I know that there's always going to be this, you know, really high level attitude required that says, no, you keep going to the end. But deep down, you know. And I think we knew that Miles Lewis-Skelly was getting exposed. I think we knew that we couldn't control the midfield in the way that we would have liked. And I think we knew that some of our better players weren't quite at it. So what did we do? We sort of, and I don't even want to say we went too defensive, but we just made a couple of adjustments in terms of positioning, how high our line was, etc., as I've already sort of covered, to make sure that we didn't lose it. And listen, maybe if the table looks different, maybe if Man City win, then you throw more at it to try and win it. But because they didn't, that gave us a bit of a safety net and a cushion, didn't it? And that's why I was saying in the lead up to the game that where we were nervous about it, even still, we were nervous in a different type of way. We were nervous about, you know, our prospects and seizing an opportunity, whereas we would have been nervous about our lead under different circumstances had City won. So there was an opportunity, we didn't take it. But can anyone hand on heart sit here and say that Man City are great and that they're not going to give us more opportunities over the course of the season? Because if you think that, you're not watching. And what I would also argue is, and I said this to the guys on the Loose Cannons podcast this morning that I went on, really grateful to get an invite, really good chat with the boys. I said, we're all conditioned to believe that we have to be perfect, that we have to be like Manchester City Centurions in order to win this league. No, we don't. We just have to be better than those that we're competing with. And right now we are better. We're 6 points better than Manchester City, I would argue, having played the harder fixtures. Afsar says, do you think Gyökeres coming on as a substitute will be a better option when the defenders are a bit tired? In my opinion, we need a fully fit Kai Havertz back up front. He's a fighter. I don't know right now with Victor Gyökeres. I feel like, do you know, like sometimes when you're angry with your children because they've been playing up, and it's just like, you know that you're going to forgive them and you know that you're going to support them and back them like the next time around or whatever, but you just need that separation. Like I feel like that with Victor Gyökeres. Like I just need to not see him in the lineup, and he probably won't be at Portsmouth, just to create that little bit of separation. I will go back to supporting him. I will go back to wanting him to do well. But that doesn't mean that I think he's at the level. And I'm finding it really hard to keep making excuses for him. A fully fit Kai Havertz is a better option for me, but based on what I've seen so far. But how long is it going to take us to get Havertz up to that level? I thought he would have been back in the squad in the last couple of games. He hasn't been, I'm told, as I asked the question to Mikel after the game, that it's just about managing his load. And I suppose when you think about it logically, how can you leave out fully fit players from the bench in order to accommodate someone that isn't ready yet? I kind of get that logic. But yeah, a fully fit Kai Havertz is a better option for me at this moment in time. Yeah, for sure. For sure. Card says, do you think tactics dictated that we kept shape and position over getting second balls and loose balls? Felt like we left a lot of gaps in midfield. I can't remember, and I might be obviously just overblowing this and, you know, being a little bit unreasonable as fans tend to be after disappointments, but I can't remember us winning many second balls or third balls or fourth balls or fifth balls. We weren't quick enough to the loose balls, but it goes back to the point I was making about the midfields. If Liverpool essentially at times had 6 players in the middle of the park, then the probability of them getting to loose balls first was always going to be higher. So I think tactically, we missed a bit of a trick there. I think we missed a bit of a trick there. What else have we got? Just having a look through the chat. Pigeonhead says, we're winning this. The sooner everyone else accepts this idea, the easier life will be. Yeah. Look, I said on my Patreon piece last night, I think I said this. If I didn't, I said it to someone. I can't remember. Check us out on Patreon. Go and sign up. I think I said something along the lines of, had we won, I would have made us 70% likely to win the title. Now I'm still 50, 60%. But that's still a pretty good place to be, isn't it? And that's the thing. Shacklebolt, I knew this was going to come up, but we're going to do like a kind of transfer windowy type show tomorrow. So I don't want to sort of go into this in too much detail and in too much depth, but on Mark Gay, because it was reported first yesterday by John Cross that Arsenal are one of the teams interested, and then David Ornstein came out with it. It is my understanding that Arsenal are not looking to sign Mark Gay in January, and therefore being in the race or not come the summer is probably going to be dependent on whether or not he makes a move before then. If he doesn't, then why can't we enter the conversation? Why can't we throw our names in the ring? The only thing and the only concern and worry I would have, and maybe a concern that he would have, is how much game time will he get at Arsenal, given that Saliba and Gabriel are the go-tos. So that's interesting. Thomas says, how much rotation do you expect versus Portsmouth? We have a Chelsea quarterfinal on Wednesday. I'd change all of them, all 11 for me, if possible. I don't think it's going to be possible when you think about some of the injuries we got in certain areas, but I think as close to that as possible. MI Tech says, why are people overreacting on Gyökeres' performance when none of our forwards were sharp and or effective? Because with Gyökeres, it's a build-up. You know, people have not been convinced all season. This isn't like, if it was just last night, I'd come away from it. I'd go off day. Saka had an off day, particularly in that second half. He did nothing. Trossard had an off day. Odegaard had an off day. That's absolutely fine. But it's a build-up, isn't it, with him? Wes Bird says, Harry, regardless of whether we rate Gyökeres or not, Arteta does struggle with a true number 9 and actually prefers to play with a false 9, or is that too simplistic? No, I think we are a team that probably benefit more from having a false 9 than we do an out-and-out 9. But then that's a hunch that I have, but also we've never had, not under Mikel Arteta anyway, not since Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, Not since Arsenal was strong enough to compete have we had a number 9, an out-and-out number 9 that was good enough. Because Victor Gyökeres right now for me isn't good enough. Bill says, did we forget that Liverpool are a strong team? They were obviously up for the match. Absolutely. And if people were under any illusions about what Liverpool's approach was going to be, you only had to listen to Dominic Szoboszlai in the lead-up, where he was sort of very strong on, no, we're still the champions, right? And until someone wins it, we're still the champions, and we still want to show that we're the champions. They were always going to come. They were always going to turn up. They were always going to make themselves difficult to beat. And I think they did a really good job. And I can praise them today in a way that I probably couldn't yesterday. Look, we're going to leave it there. We've been running for an hour. Thank you all so much for the love, for the support. Let's quickly check in where we're at in terms of the likes. Have we got any closer to that target that Nah, we're not a million miles away. There's still enough of you watching for us to easily, comfortably cross that 100 mark. So if you haven't done so already, please leave a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel. Subscribe on Apple, Spotify, Patreon as well. Whatever your preferred podcast platform is. Remember, with Patreon, you get access to exclusive episodes. You get all our normal episodes completely ad-free and access to our Discord server. If you need the link to that Discord server, because I know those links expire, please do DM me on Patreon if you've signed up, and I will ping it over to you straight away. So yeah, please do that. It's something I can do from my phone, so I can do it at any time. So do get in touch with me there. Yeah, bigger picture is much brighter than it probably feels like it is today because of that frustration and disappointment. But the fact that we're frustrated and disappointed with the fact that we won 5 out of our last 6 and we're 6 points clear out of the top at the top of the Premier League, it shows how the bar has been raised. We're still the favourites, and for good reason. We've got to draw a line under this, and we've got to move on. Thank you all so much for your listenership, and I will see you all tomorrow, where we'll be talking transfers and kind of semi-previewing the Portsmouth FA Cup game as well. All the best. Goodbye.
Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe. Chronicles of a Gooner. Harry Symeou time. Arsenal. Come on, you Gunners. Arsenal. Chronicles of a Gooner.